That's what I do normally. I offer style advice to you.
Oof.
Anyway.
Golf chic. All right,
like
so
that,
we're gonna start.
That sweater is not working. Sorry.
What are you talking about? You know how many patients?
Double-breasted sweater.
You know how many patients it made them
complimented you?
Just to see my sweater. I wore it just for you, just for Myladys over here. Nice.
It brings out your eyes.
Thank you.
I have to say, thank you. I have to say, like, I love the dynamic that you guys carry on the show. It's like, that's usually kind of like what you want on a podcast. It's kind of like yin and yang.
Yeah, I'm the brains and the looks, and he's like the technical support.
Anyway.
It's our alter ego. We'll start though, I know.
Welcome back to Recommended Daily Dose. I am the yang of Dr. Saggar's yang. I'm Dr. Clenton Coleman, along with Dr. Suraj Saggar. We have Myladys Traina. She is a program manager for several wellness programs, including ones that do executive physicals and concierge programs. And they focus on improving the quality of life through prevention and nutrition. So today we're going to talk about her holistic approach to health and nutrition, which I'm very interested in. So welcome, Myladys. How are you?
Thank you.
Thank you. I definitely have, a lot to talk about, but, we have just a certain amount of time. So we got to get straight to it. So to really get into like how I got into nutrition, it really started with my own journey.
Yeah.
So I used to work as part of a hospital. I used to really support patient navigation program. So I worked really closely with cancer patients for about 2 years or so. And I think that's what really sparked my curiosity. I started to ask, like, why are we seeing so many cancer cases, And when I met these individuals that I would help, when someone's in that point in their life where they're diagnosed with cancer, what hits them immediately, what you see through their eyes is like, they're willing to do whatever it takes to know that it could possibly prolong their life, right? They're fighting for their life. And what I realize now on my wellness journey is I'm fighting for my life every day, and I'm someone who's healthy.
Right.
And I think that's really the conversation we need to be having, because if we're looking at cancer and how far it's really risen, we're looking at now a 41% chance of developing cancer in the US.
So I think the idea is that certainly some risk factors you can't change, right? There's genetics and other things, but there's definitely these modifiable life factors. That's why I'm very interested to talk to you about this, and in terms of your journey, because while I do infectious disease and Clinton does nephrology, primary care, we can always incorporate, lifestyle changes, et cetera, into our conversations. But yeah, this is a huge thing, right? It doesn't matter what specialty medicine you're doing. People are all interested in saying, what can we do to change and decrease our chances? So how was it nutrition specifically that you got into? Because I know the reason I'm going to say this, I'm an ID doc, and part of what I do here at Holy Name Medical Center is that I chair the infection prevention program. And so, gowning, gloving, hand hygiene, et cetera. I noticed that even you had something with hand hygiene, and you have to kind of tell us where that was in your development as a project that kind of got you into then nutrition and wellness.
Right. Yeah, it definitely has been, quite a journey. And I think every step of the way has led me to here. Yeah. So, back to the point on cancer, and just that really sparked my curiosity. But after that, I really started to look into functional medicine. So I started to look into that field, and I'm that type of person. I'm very passionate about health. So you name the book, I read it. This is what keeps me up at night. So what really started off is realizing that, everybody had the COVID-20, and gained weight. So for me, it was like COVID-24. So at that point,
it was COVID. How much did you gain?
I was working the whole time, and I actually lost weight.
His hips.
Good for you.
Yeah, I lost weight. Clinton grew, like his hair got a lot of control. We had I think the Jerry curl situation was Soul Glow was sold out. Whatever. But it was, we all had our demons to fight, but we've all, well, some of us, I think, you and me maybe have pulled through. Clinton still got some work to do, but continue. Sorry.
Right. No, you're good. So I gained weight. I also realized that, my cholesterol was high. And, as you know, when you look at cholesterol, you're looking at your HDL levels, LDL, your triglycerides.
Right.
So, for the listeners that are listening and don't know, you want your LDL levels to be below 100, right? So mine were at 124. So that is when I then developed a plan with a functional medicine doctor. And, I told her, I'm trying to really focus on having an anti-inflammatory diet. And my question was, I think dairy may be a problem for me. And she's like, I think you're right. She's like, I think you should cut it out for 6 weeks. I cut it out. For the first time in my life, when I woke up after I eliminated dairy, my stomach was flat. And what's crazy is that, I was always a really skinny kid growing up, but I always noticed, and kind of like looking at a recent video, like one of those home videos, I always had like a food belly. I was bloated. I had no idea. I just thought I had, a little pouch, a gut. And I had no idea my whole life I was sensitive to dairy. Dairy was causing inflammation. So I removed that out of my diet. I also was really strict with the oils. I here and there would allow soybean oil or canola oil. I really only focused on extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or coconut oil. In a matter of 4 months, I retested my cholesterol. So I went from 124 to 75.
Wow. But the problem is you need, why do patients need a functional medicine doctor to figure that out, right?
Like, can you back up? Because I think that term gets thrown out a lot. So, and especially if
all medicine is functional,
but can you or maybe both of you can you define what is a functional medicine in general as an idea or as a theory? There's ideas like precision medicine, individualized medicine, but I know functional medicine is basically using, I guess, food is wellness is medicine. What does it really mean?
You're really looking at the root cause, the root cause. And, I think, I'll continue with my journey, but I think this is also like a great segue for Dr. Coleman to actually give an example, and I could kind of lead that. So Dr. Coleman actually functioned as a functional medicine doctor, really how most doctors should function. You're really getting to the root of the problem, right? And
this Dr. Coleman, just want to make sure we're talking about this Dr. Coleman. Oh, all right. I just want to make sure because make sure it's believable. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So he saw a patient back in September. I'll let you do it, and Dr. Coleman, you could do the grand finale, what you found. So 2018 was when this patient really started with symptoms. He had chronic diarrhea 3 to 4 times a day. I don't know how this individual functioned, and he had no idea why it was happening. He saw 2 different specialists from 2018 until Dr. Coleman saw him in September. He's not even 50 years old, had 2 colonoscopies, had an endoscopy. I mean, he was seeing a digestive disease specialist, right? A gastroenterologist, 2 different, and could not find what was wrong until he actually saw Dr. Coleman. And I'll let you take it from here.
No, I just thought it was, like you said, I thought it was weird that this guy had the same symptoms for several years and had a workup. And I simply just asked what he eats and went over a diary of his diet. And, he kind of pinpointed to certain types of foods. So I thought, let's just check if you're, gluten sensitive or maybe you have celiac disease. So we did the test and it was positive. And, he cut away from gluten and his symptoms resolved. I didn't think that was such rocket science thing, but I think as doctors, we probably get overcomplicated in our thought process. And, and I've had the same conversations about lactose too, right? So, people of color tend to have more lactose intolerance. And once you talk to them about what they're eating or actually take the time to sit and figure out, what the root cause of the problem is, it can have a life-changing effect. And that's just the food. Imagine, all kinds of other things. But I think the fact that we have a whole specialty called functional medicine speaks to the lack of, adequate training for the rest of the doctors, because the patient shouldn't have to see 3 or 4 specialists to figure out that it's a food allergy.
I'll take a step further though. So, I don't do primary care, so I'm not in a position to necessarily
to have a conversation with us. Is that what you're saying?
No, listen, I'm dealing with bugs, most of the time, bacteria, fungi, whatever. But the reason this is actually a point to my madness here is that functional medicine, is growing into even what we call precision medicine. And we're realizing, or individualized medicine, right? So what is good for one person is not good for other. We have to look at ethnic differences and not just cultural makeups, but, within different ethnicities and cultures, everyone's individualized. We realize it's our human genome interacting with our normal gut flora, bacteria, right? Called that the microbiome. I always tell my patients for every one human cell, we have 10 bacterial cells. And depending on which bacterial cells you have, it can turn on or turn off certain genes. It can be associated with certain cancers, certain disease processes. You alluded to inflammation. It can be associated with autoimmune disorders. And so the way medicine's heading, right, is a big part is like identifying people's human genome and seeing what's the optimal diet, what's the optimal diet or microbiome environment that would enable health. And they may be different for different people. I mean, I know, and that's where it gets confusing for me, much less the general public, is someone might say, give up dairy and eat meat. Some will say, give up meat and eat legumes. Some will say, eat wheat, but don't eat gluten. You know, so it becomes very, it depends. Is it just and I'm playing devil's advocate, but is it a diet du jour? Or how do we know exactly what, or really maybe it's not, we can't just make a blanket statement. Everyone gives up dairy, everyone gives up gluten. It's individualized, right? And I think that's where we're headed towards, because diets come and go. And what may work for one person may not work for another. I mean, your thoughts on that?
Right. No, I completely agree with you. I think it's by individual. I think there are stable things like of course, hydrating and fats are important. I think there are key things, but, I get messages all the time. I've been really out there on, social media lately, and, it gets a lot of people's attention, when you post like, hey, I lost 24 pounds in this much time. And,
right.
I'm no more bloating for me. So it gets people's attention, and they're constantly asking like, what supplements do I take? Or, should I give me a list of what to do? But it's not that simple. Like, I actually have to have a conversation with you, just like how we're having just a conversation. And I really have to understand, of course, you're going to give them the tools they need on what to eat. But for example, not everybody agrees with dairy, just like not everybody agrees with beans. Sometimes people get bloated with beans. And
right.
Something I would suggest is you actually are able to sprout your beans. You could sprout them before digesting them and consuming them, so you could digest them a little bit better. So that's something that I would do for a patient like that. So I think it all depends on the individual. But not only that, I think we have to treat the whole individual. We have to look at why diets or lifestyle change hasn't really worked in the past.
So what has not worked in the past? No, right. So looking like what they call a more holistic approach. And I think that used to be the realm of, well, only people who are in primary care or in family medicine, but people realizing it doesn't matter what specialty you are, nothing, in our body exists in a vacuum, right? So everything's affected. And with infectious disease, we're seeing more and more of how alterations in the microbiome can either be protective or make someone vulnerable.
Which I think is interesting, as a host of an amazing podcast, we've talked to people from at each spectrum as far as nutrition. So we've talked to the strict vegans, the raw vegans, the plant-based, and then we have like the carnivores and
that was
the intermittent and the intermittent fasting. And, some diets work for some people, some diets work for other people. So I think these trends and these blanket diets aren't really good for everybody. So I think that individual-based approach, I think what you're touching on is extremely important.
Right. Like just to give an example, like carnivore diet, that's something that's new. And, I had to learn, what that entails. Like, if you kind of get the gist of the 101 carnivore and eat as much meat as you can and kind of just following the criteria, some people will say, just eat any type of meat. Like, you want high quality meats, you want grass fed or grass finished. But some people would say, just grab any meat, even bologna or hot dogs. Well, hot dogs have been shown to have heavy metals in them. That's not something I would recommend someone to eat, because at the end of the day, we now know heavy metals are connected with heart disease and Alzheimer's. So, I think we have to really look at the whole picture. I don't even just talk about what's on your plate, but also things that could damage your health. For example, not many people know that when you're cooking something on aluminum foil, it actually absorbs some of the heavy metals and you digest it. Right. What happens to heavy metals in the body? We bioaccumulate it. Our body doesn't know how to detox heavy metals unless you have a protocol that you start to detox heavy metals. Right. So these are kind of the things that, I address with patients. And, July, I'll be actually launching a nutrition program, and it's going to really consist not only just having like a one-time appointment, it's really going to have to be like following up, just like if you were to see a therapist. Let's say you're struggling with a marriage. You don't just see that person one time. You're trying to change your whole lifestyle. It really is a lifestyle change. So it's not just in one sitting.
So I'd be interested. I know you're talking about your journey, so maybe we go back to that, because I know I was looking through it quickly. I know at one time you did your MBA, not one time, you did your MBA, and now you're going back for nutrition. So I mean, but is that you're trying to incorporate all different aspects of your background into your is it wellness or into your wellness program that you're offering?
Yeah. So my passion is wellness, and so the hope is, well, I'm developing a program that we're going to launch in July, but it's really going to be like, it's not going to be like a one-stop shop where you're going to have a consultation. It's going to be, you're going to purchase a package where I'm going to follow you for, a certain amount of months. Because there's a lot of things that affect people. Sometimes it could be, your relationship, your marriage, right? Maybe your marriage is suffering, and because of that, you're not eating properly. Maybe you hate your job and you're not living a person.
What about like toxic colleagues or friends? Like if you have like a friend or a colleague or a co-host that's just like somehow making me so upset that I emotionally will just drink coffee 24/7. I mean, is that also?
Or you eat your Haagen-Dazs. That's what your whole pint of Haagen-Dazs. That's what
First of all, I eat very healthy, and but continue. I wanted to hear about what you're offering. We'll go into that, but then also I want to also backtrack and ask a little bit about because as Clinton alluded to, we'll just say it now. We've had the whole gamut of spectrum of ultra vegan, vegetarian, raw, all the way to carnivore. But so there's also was like can be cultural and religious sensibilities, so to speak, right? So I mean, I have mentioned at various guests, that I'm Hindu, and I don't, and so we don't eat beef. That's just a part of our tradition. So obviously, if someone tells me they're a carnivore, I'm like, oh my god, that's a bit extreme. Having said that, I eat cheese and I like dairy, so a vegan diet would be way too extreme for me too. I have chosen a pescatarian, if anyone cares, for no other reason than it just works for me. So I'm well aware that what works for one doesn't work for the other. But do you incorporate, or would you be planning to incorporate that as well, right? People's belief systems. It probably doesn't work, I'm guessing, if it's so strict and this is what you have to do, and if you don't do it, then I can't follow you. I'm assuming that you have to also work within people's belief systems, structures, what have you.
Right. No, I think that's a great point, because I find that there are nutrition providers out there that are really restrictive.
Right.
They like strive for perfection. Like, how can anybody actually stick to something like that? So I think there are ways to make the foods that you like to eat. Like, for example, in my culture, we're very used to, traditional is like plantains with fried egg, fried salami, fried cheese. Well, what my mom grew up doing was using like canola oil, which a lot of people use to fry, and it's highly inflammatory. If you would want to have something like that, I would say fry it in avocado oil, right? So then you're not having something that's inflammatory. Salami here and there, but at the end of the day, it's processed meat. So you don't really want to have it a lot. So, I would probably take that out. So that kind of thing. So I do work with individuals.
I think what I struggle with as a primary care physician is spending enough time, explaining, different aspects of like patient-centered, like individual-based diets. Don't eat carbs and don't eat rice, bread, and pasta. And that's usually the gist of it, less processed foods. And then they leave, they probably do it for a few days and then go back to their diet. So there's no accountability for that. It's interesting that that's your work with cancer patients sparked that, because when people have this extreme situation like cancer, their life changes immediately. Like, I don't want to give everybody cancer just so they can eat better. Is there a way you think that we could try to hold people accountable?
Right.
So because it's like cancer is a pretty finite thing, right? If you have high blood pressure or diabetes, you're really not thinking of the long-term effects. It's not the scariest thing in the world, as opposed to cancer. Like, if I had cancer, like I'm not eating a hot dog for the rest of my life. It's hard for me.
You're saying what to get people to realize that earlier on,
Yeah, I'm thinking, the approach that we use as doctors and even nutritionists is just like, here's what you're not supposed to eat and move on. Like, so it's interesting that you have a program that actually holds people accountable.
Right, right. And I think to your point, to what you were saying, and I think this ties into, I think what really sparked my passion in this, and a lot of people don't really connect the dots. So I'll give you an example. What separates me from other nutritionists out there. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know this, even a lot of nutritionists out there. So I'll give the example of, you have two different nutritionists, right? Both of them have masters in nutrition, right? They see the same client. Let's say the client has high cholesterol, right? So one will tell the client, I want you to avoid canola oil as part of the list of oils that you're going to avoid. It's highly inflammatory, canola oil. The way it's processed, it goes through a high heat process. It's deodorized. It uses hexane, which is a byproduct of gasoline, to extract the oil. It's so far from the way nature intended us to have oil. So that's the first nutritionist will tell the client that. The second one will say, canola oil is fine. It's part of the list of omega-3s. It's good to have it. So that one that told that patient that, I started to realize, why is it that certain nutritionists will contradict each other? And specifically, canola oil is a great example. And I'll tell you why. And I think we have to connect the dots, because I think it sparks something in people. And I'll connect the dots. And you really have to start from the top. So you have to look at, where is a nutritionist getting the information from, right? What academy were they educated from? So I'll give an example. Eat Right Academy is a prestigious science-based academy that a lot of nutritionists use. But when you look at their sponsors, I'll pick out one of their big sponsors is Bayer. So Bayer, for those people that don't know, Bayer owns Monsanto.
Yeah.
Monsanto. Roundup. There you go.
I know that because my wife works for Bayer.
All right.
She works in data.
I'm done with this.
No. She works in data science and finance and in like global marketing. So believe me, this is a big stain on their mark that we're well aware of. But please continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Bayer, who makes Roundup weed killer, but for the people that don't know this, one of the active ingredients in Roundup weed killer is glyphosate. And glyphosate is being sprayed on crops, specifically non-organic crops. And it's becoming a big problem. So 2 years ago, because of the Roundup weed killer, for the people that don't know, they actually had, one of the biggest lawsuits. Actually is one of the largest settlements ever in U.S. civil litigation. And it was about, I wrote it down, $10 billion. So that was 2 years ago. And here you have a sponsor who has that tied to them, and they're interested in educating nutritionists, right? So they're tied to something that has harmed someone. And here they are wanting to be involved with educating the public on nutrition, right? So it gets better. So does anyone know who was appointed a year ago, actually just made the first year anniversary, February, who was appointed as U.S. Secretary of Agriculture?
Don't tell me the former CEO of Bayer.
Tom Vilsack. He is known as Mr. Monsanto. He was the co-founder of the Roundup weed killer.
Gotcha. Right.
So that's who was appointed for, to be the U.S., Secretary of Agriculture of the U.S.
I will say, I think food science in general, like especially in the old days, was a lot of controversies because what I read was that the sugar industry sponsored a lot of food science, back in the 60s and 70s, and may have vilified fats at the expense of sugar, and that's why a lot of people are going back and saying, hey, maybe it's not the fat that's the problem, it's the sugar, the refined sugar, the white flour, things like that. So you're absolutely right. You always have to look at the background of what's happening, who's sponsoring.
We talked about the, American Heart Association. Remember, they were promoting sugars, carbs, because they wanted to get away from fats.
Right.
whether they were good fats or bad fats. But, you know, there's always some ulterior motive, unfortunately. So, you know, remember the nutritionists for teaching the food pyramid. So we know where they stand. So
Right.
I think it's time for a revolution in nutrition.
Right. And then, you know, when I found that piece of information out, I saw that this actually hasn't been the first time he's been appointed as U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. Previously, it was during the Obama administration as well. So he's a repeat offender.
That's actually shocking. I had no idea. That's both interesting and in a shocking way, I should say. So
it is. It's pretty scary. And then so when you start from the bottom like that and realize there's a problem, you have to like really start from the top. Well, what's going on in the top to really drive this? So, you know, when you look at canola oil, which is what we started talking about, well, Monsanto, they actually spray their canola seeds with glyphosate, with that Roundup weed killer. So if they're using their product on these seeds and to make canola oil, then they want everybody to consume canola oil. And that's what it is. But, you know, E-Rate Academy is not the only academy who has this on their list. There are other institutions that also, you know, are pushing this. And the sad reality is that here is somebody who has a degree, not only just any degree, they have a master's degree in nutrition and they have no idea.
No idea, right?
No idea. And I think that's the scary thing. I think we need to just be our own advocate. I think we need to be alert. We need to be, you know, listening to podcasts, reading books, and doing our own research, because at the end of the day, you know, I found out about this because I'm so passionate about it, because I live what I preach. And I think that's another important thing. A lot of these people in the healthcare field, a lot of people in general that are preaching something, but they themselves don't embody it. And when you embody it, you become passionate about it. You read about it. It's constantly something you consume because you really value the information. And, you know, that is just one example out of hundreds, but lack of time, you know, I'm not going to go through 100 examples of how we connected the dots, but a lot of people say, well, trust the science, you know, trust the science. Well, you have to be able to really investigate and see what science is biased and what's not biased, you know?
That's a whole another episode of podcast, you know.
Yes.
But you hit upon an extremely important point. We appreciate. I will say that your passion for what you do certainly shows through. So we were very appreciative of that. So thank you for the insight. And you know, I think there's a lot more we could talk about. I think we barely even scratched the surface.
We're gonna have a part two.
Yeah. Before we go, can you tell us a little bit about where some of your social media handles? You know, where we can find you, etc. Especially since Clinton, I think, you know, he has a relatively unhealthy addiction to, was it spicy chicken fillet sandwich? Whatever it is, I think you might need detox from that.
Popeyes.
Oh, Popeyes.
I had, listen. I had Arby's.
He was the first in line.
We could work with that. We could do a clean version of it. We could get you the fried chicken.
Can I confess?
Yes.
So we were, the family was on the road. We had to run to the airport. So the only thing available was Arby's.
Oh, man.
And I had Arby's, and it tasted good for the first few bites, and after that I was like,
you paid the price.
My stomach was upside down. The kids were like
crying,
pooping everywhere. It was just, so I've learned my lesson. But yeah, that's
so next time Clinton has an
forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
Yeah, has a hankering for Arby's. Where can he find you? Like, can he send you an email? Are you on social media? Where can he find you?
So the best place right now is on Instagram, Wellness Lens. So wellness and lens, like a magnifying lens. So Wellness Lens, you'll find me. And then I'll really be keeping people updated. I'm going to be coming out with some recipes. People are excited. You know, people are like, I need recipes, you know, so that's definitely something I'll be posting, as well as just like food swaps. So people can follow me on there. And then, you know, once we launch the program in July, I'll be releasing the website.
Also, that's very exciting.
And we'll have you back on after you post your program. So that'd be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah,
very exciting. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. We are much appreciative of your time, your passion, your expertise, your knowledge, your dedication to helping others, and for volunteering to take on Clinton as a client. I think that's going to be, you're going to have your hands full with that. But
we got to get you the fried chicken.
Yeah. If you can turn that, because obviously I eat clean, you can tell by the way I look, etc. You can see Clinton's like, you know, shoulders,
You,
droopy.
you have that
posture.
canola oil glow on your forehead.
Man, I'm eating extra virgin oil, and
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
In a dark glass. In a dark glass, that has
That's
to be.
right, with no sunlight penetrating. And I do eat dairy. I'm not a vegan. I'm not gonna pretend, but I'm a pescatarian. But again, I think we've clearly established that different things work for different people, and that's what we look forward to learning more about with you. So thank you so very much for joining us on Recommend Daily Dose. I am your co-host, Dr. Suraj Saggar, with my sidekick, Dr. Clinton Coleman. Find us on Spotify, on where else are we, Clinton? We're on YouTube. As you know. We are Apple. Anywhere you might find your and digest your local podcast. Remember to rate, subscribe, and listen. Until next time, be well.